PMDD, I'm gonna just quickly, for anybody that doesn't know, share what it is. It is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and it is a very, very severe PMS, essentially. And from some stats they did at Oxford, it is estimated that around 1.6% of women and girls who people who have periods have PMDD. So that is actually, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a lot of people. Yeah, so I wanted to start by asking you how you figured out you had PMDD.
So first of all, I'd been on antidepressants for a few years, for 3 years, and I came off them at the end of January in 2022. And I was fine coming off them and everything was good. I was in a very good like mental headspace. And then it started to get towards like winter. I recently got into a new relationship and I noticed that like we had a couple of really bad arguments and a lot of them stemmed from me being very emotional and very like almost like inconsolable about certain topics. Like, and it was really weird. Like, I would like wake up, I'd be fine. And then one day I'd wake up and it was almost like a light switch had like switched off in my head and all the lights were out and I was in a totally new body with a different brain. And it was just like I completely wasn't myself. And it was a really weird experience. And I would feel so deeply insecure about like myself and my work. And I would be like, I just felt really down and all this stuff. And it kind of usually ended up being a situation of like me maybe taking a comment a little bit too personally, or maybe someone saying something to me online that would upset me more than it usually would, or me, or like my partner, like being blunt with me over messages, and I think that he's like ignoring me or doesn't want to talk to me and things like that. And it made me very sensitive. And I'm quite a communicative person when it comes to my emotions. So I'd be like, oh, is everything okay? Like, what's going on? Like, I feel like you're being dismissive, blah, blah, blah. And then it would somehow develop into an argument. And whereas usually I'd be like, probably level headed enough to be like, he's just busy at work. It's fine. Like, it's like, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. I was like very not okay. And then I also like, I just felt like I was getting really bad waves of body dysmorphia coming back. Like my felt like everything. And basically like this happened and then there'd be a complete meltdown and it would last for like maybe like 10 days or so. And then I'd be like, fine. And then I'd be like, okay, cool, I'm okay, like everything's fine and whatever. Like that was just a bad phase or I was having a bad day, really bad day. And it would really freak me out every time I would feel this way because having suffered from depression before, I'd be like, oh my God, my depression is coming back. And it would really freak me out. And then I'd be fine. And then it would come back. And it was only maybe after 3 months of it coming back. And I kind of like I've been tracking my cycle for a while, and I looked at my cycle and was like, hang on a minute, like this kind of happens every single month around about the same time. But I was like, but this isn't PMS because like you only get PMS 5 days before your period. So it's not PMS because this is happening like kind of in the middle of my cycle, like in the
Mm.
latter, like in like the last half of my cycle.
Mm.
So I was like, it's happening too soon for it to be PMS. And I was like, researching it after having like some really severe like awful breakdowns and being in a very 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 dark place in my head and like really like I find it really hard to talk about it because it takes me like back to a really like difficult time. And I remember reading about PMDD, and it wasn't the first time I'd heard about it. I had heard about it before, but I sort of brushed it off as most women do, brush these things off. And I remember sending the article link to like my mum and my dad who had been very concerned about me, very concerned. And they were like, this, my dad especially was like, this is you. This is Sophie. This happens once a month. This happens like for like several days, once a month, and then she's fine. And this is a big thing. And even like it was interesting speaking to my parents about it because they were like, you know what, when you were in your teenage years and you were living at home, you actually were a fucking nightmare when you were during your period. Like you really were, like you really went into a bad place. And like, so it's something that I probably have had for a long time. And I remember after going on my antidepressants, my GP, I had to go for a checkup after 6 months. And I was like, oh my God, my life's amazing. These have saved me. I'm so good. And my GP was actually like really grilling me a little bit, being like, when did you feel like you know, you had low moods, and he was like, did you feel like it'd be all of the month or just some of the month? And I'd be like, usually I'd be like pretty low generally, but then like during like in the lead up to my period, I'd be like really bad, like really, really, really super suicidal instead of just maybe a little bit suicidal. And like I don't mean to use those terms lightly. It's just a way of sort of kind of making peace
Yeah.
with how fucking depressed I was back then. And he was like, he's like, this does actually sound like it could be more like PMDD instead of actual like just baseline depression. But like if the antidepressants are working for you, then that's great and that's all that's important. And then I just kind of brushed it off because I was like, like
Mm.
my life's great now. And then it only twigged in me like after I'd come off my antidepressants and these symptoms were appearing and I realized what it was. And I was there like, oh my God, that I feel like that doctor could have been right. And actually, it was really nice and surprising that a GP actually even brought that up in the first place, to be honest. But yeah, that's kind of how I discovered it. That was a really long-winded way of saying how I discovered it. And yeah, that was January 2023.